He used to boil young girls in rose water and turn them into a strange and unforgettable perfume. Almost every day, another dead body was found somewhere in the city. The victims were completely naked and all of their hair had been cut off. The whole city was living in fear. The police tried everything to catch the killer, but he never stopped. This time, his target was an incredibly beautiful young woman from one of the richest families in Paris. Getting close to her was almost impossible. It was like trying to solve an unsolved mystery. But while trying to reach her, he finally got caught. In front of the entire town, the court announced his punishment. 2 days later, he would be hanged in public. The order was clear. He would stay hanging until he took his last breath. As soon as the people heard the verdict, they celebrated with joy. The name of this terrifying murderer was Jean-Baptiste Grenouille. God had not given him an ordinary nose. He had given him a very special gift. His sense of smell was so powerful that he could detect scents no one else in the world could notice. From here, the story goes back to his childhood. Grenouille's mother worked in a fish market. One day, she suddenly went into labor and Grenouille was born right there. The moment he was born, his mother kicked him aside. Before him, she had already killed 4 newborn babies. She believed this child had also died. But then Grenouille smelled the filthy market around him and suddenly cried out loudly. His mother panicked and tried to run away. The people saw everything and started shouting. She was caught and she was hanged on the same day. After that, Grenouille was legally sent to an orphanage. The woman who managed the place was Madame Gaillard. She was already middle-aged and there was no room left for another child, but she could not refuse the government's order. Somehow she made space for Grenouille by putting him in the same bed as a few other boys. This created another problem. There was hardly enough room for everyone to sleep. Because of that, the other children secretly decided to kill Grenouille. But before they could do anything, Madame Gaillard found out about their plan. Once again, Grenouille's life was saved. Those orphaned children were the main source of income for Madame Gaillard. She made them work the whole day to earn money. Soon, 5 years passed. Even after turning 5 years old, Grenouille could not speak a single word. His behavior also seemed very strange. He smelled everything around him as if every object was something sweet. As time passed, his unusual ability became even stronger. He could close his eyes and still recognize things that were far away just by their smell. He could tell where a stone was or where a frog was without even looking. A few years later, he finally learned how to speak. When he turned 13, Madame Gaillard no longer had space for him. She had no choice but to sell Grenouille to a leather merchant. At the same time, some robbers had already been watching Madame Gaillard. While she was returning with the money, they attacked her on the road. They killed her and stole all the money she was carrying. Grenouille was then sent to work in a tannery. During that time, people working in leather factories lived for only about 5 years on average. The factories were filled with dangerous chemicals, dirty water, and a terrible smell. Most workers died after only a few years because of the horrible conditions. One day, his owner took him into the city for work. That was the first time Grenouille realized that the city was filled with countless scents. The air carried thousands of different smells. There were flowers, spices, perfumes, and the scent of people everywhere. Suddenly, his nose caught a fragrance unlike anything he had ever smelled before. His owner had gone to meet a merchant whose shop was next to a perfume store. While the owner was busy with his work, Grenouille followed the mysterious scent until he reached the perfume shop. He saw people buying all kinds of perfumes. At that moment, the shopkeeper let a lady smell a newly made perfume. She was completely amazed by its fragrance and said, "Sir, you truly are a wonderful artist." But at that very moment, Grenouille noticed a scent that was even more beautiful than the perfume. It belonged to a young girl who was selling fruit nearby. Her natural fragrance drove him crazy. He slowly walked closer to her. The girl looked at him with surprise and asked, "Do you want to buy some fruit?" Grenouille said nothing. He only kept staring at her. The girl reached out her hand to give him some fruit. Instead of taking it, Grenouille grabbed her hand and started smelling it. The frightened girl quickly pulled her hand away and ran. Grenouille followed her, guided only by her scent. In the end, he reached her house. He quietly slipped inside. The girl was all alone. When she turned around and saw him, she became terrified and screamed. Grenouille immediately covered her mouth. Just then, a couple walked past the house. He kept her mouth covered until they had gone. Because she could no longer breathe, the girl died. Grenouille felt truly sad because he had never wanted to kill her. But even after her death, her skin still carried that rare and beautiful fragrance. He removed her clothes and carefully smelled every part of her body, trying to remember every detail of her scent. She became his first victim. Later that night, when he returned, his owner beat him badly. He warned Grenouille that if he ever disappeared again without permission, he would kill him. That night, Grenouille could not sleep. It was not because of the beating. It was because the girl's fragrance had shown him his true purpose. He finally understood why he had been born. He believed he was meant to capture the most beautiful scent in the world and preserve it forever. At that time, there were around a dozen perfume makers in Paris. One of them was the Italian perfumer Giuseppe Baldini. His shop stood in the middle of the Pont au Change bridge. 3 years earlier, Baldini had been the most famous perfumer in the business. But now, many new perfume makers had entered the market, and his shop had become almost empty. These days, the people of Paris were obsessed with a brand new perfume. It was the same perfume we saw a little earlier. Everyone wanted it. Baldini Baldini carefully studied its fragrance. He recognized lemon oil, clove extract, and many other ingredients mixed together. He tried again and again to recreate it, but every attempt failed. Finally, exhausted and disappointed, he fell asleep at his desk. A short time later, someone knocked on the door. It was Granuel, who had come to deliver the goatskin that Baldini had ordered. Baldini opened the door and invited him inside. As Granuel entered the shop, his eyes carefully examined everything around him. He slowly smelled every bottle, every glass vial, and every drop of oil that was placed inside the shop. Baldini examined the goatskin carefully. After checking it, he nodded with satisfaction and said, "All right, but I will not pay you today. I will come and give you the money after a few days." Just then, Granuel calmly asked, "Are you planning to make a perfume from the smell of this leather?" Baldini looked at him in surprise and admitted that he was. Granuel then said, "If you allow me, I can make a perfume using the ingredients in your shop." Baldini laughed and asked, "Do you even know how to make perfume?" Granuel did not answer. Instead, he quietly walked around the room. He picked up one bottle after another and identified every scent only by smelling it. He did not use any written recipe or formula. He trusted only his powerful nose. One by one, he mixed different ingredients together. After a short time, he created a perfume with an unbelievable fragrance. It was so perfect that Baldini stood there in complete shock. The perfume was even better than the finest creation of his entire career. At that moment, Baldini decided that he could never let this boy go. He immediately paid a large amount of money to buy Granuel from his owner, but fate had something strange planned. Only a short time later, Granuel's former owner died in a bizarre accident. It almost seemed as if anyone whose life separated from Granuel soon met a tragic end. For now, however, Baldini's decision turned out to be the right one. Together, they started creating many different perfumes with unique fragrances. Their perfumes became famous across the city. Soon, Baldini's lost reputation returned, and his business became successful once again. One day, while celebrating their success, Baldini explained the secret of perfume making to Granuel. He said that every great perfume is made from 12 notes, divided into 3 parts. The first is called the head note. It is the first impression of the perfume and lasts only for a few minutes. The second is the heart note. It is the main character and true identity of the fragrance. The last is the base note. It is the soul of the perfume and keeps its scent alive for many days. Baldini then shared an old story. He said that the ancient Egyptians believed if someone could create a mysterious 13th note, then combining it with the other 12 would produce the greatest perfume ever made. Anyone who smelled it would lose control of themselves. They would feel as if they had received every happiness in the world. It would feel like standing in heaven itself. Baldini said this was not just a legend. According to old stories, such a perfume had once been found inside the tomb of a pharaoh. Those who smelled it experienced an almost heavenly feeling. Sadly, no one had ever been able to create the 13th note again. Hearing this, Granuel looked at his master and said with complete confidence, "Master, I will create that 13th note. But first, please teach me how to preserve the scent of anything." Baldini stayed silent. Meanwhile, Granuel could not stop thinking about the first girl he had killed. Every night he dreamed about her. Her fragrance haunted his mind, and he became obsessed with finding a way to keep such a scent forever. Finally, he made a deal with Baldini. He said, "I will make as many perfumes as you want. Just teach me how to capture and preserve a fragrance." Granuel wanted to learn so badly that Baldini finally agreed. He taught him how to capture the scent of a rose. After learning the process, Granuel started trying to preserve the smell of many different things. But no matter what he tried, he failed again and again. One day, his frustration became too much. He began throwing bottles and other items around the room in anger. That's when Baldini's lie was caught. He rushed in, and before Baldini could say anything, Granuel shouted in anger, "You lied to me." Granuel tried to prove his point by showing Baldini a few samples. He asked him to smell them. There was lead, iron, and copper, but none of their scents had been preserved. Baldini was shocked. He could not believe that someone was actually trying to capture the smell of metal. Then he noticed a cat boiling inside a large pot. He became furious at once. Granuel stood there silently and listened to his master's angry words. A few moments later, he suddenly collapsed and lost consciousness. A doctor was called immediately. After examining him, the doctor explained that this was the result of the many years Granuel had spent working in the tannery. His body had slowly filled with poison, and now he was dying. Baldini became terrified. He knew that if Granuel died, his successful perfume business would be ruined once again. After some time, Granuel finally woke up. But the first thing he asked was still the same. "Is there any other way to preserve the scent of anything?" Baldini replied, "There is another method, but I do not know it. It is taught only in a place called Grass." Little by little, Granuel recovered. But to travel to Grass and work there, he needed official identity papers. Baldini promised that he would arrange everything for him. In return, Granuel gave Baldini thousands of perfume formulas with many different fragrances. Baldini was overjoyed. He happily said goodbye to Granuel. He believed he now held the key to endless success, but fate had different plans. That very night, Baldini's building suddenly collapsed. He was trapped under the rubble and died. Meanwhile, Granuel continued his journey. A few days later, he reached a cave in the mountains. At first, he planned to stay there for only one night, but he remained there much longer. The cave had no smell except the scent of his own clothes. There were no people, no animals, no trees, and not even the smell of the soil. Even the rock seemed completely lifeless. For the first time in his life, Granuel found true peace in complete silence, but then he discovered something that shocked him. His own body had no scent at all. He washed himself again and again. He checked carefully many times, but there was still nothing. It was as if he did not exist in the world of smells. He could not understand why. He believed the answer could only be found in grass. So once again, he continued his journey toward the city where people had mastered the art of preserving fragrance forever. As Granuel came close to grass, he saw a beautiful carriage passing by. Inside it sat an incredibly beautiful young woman. The moment her fragrance reached him, every part of his body came alive. Without thinking twice, he began following the carriage until it entered the city. At the city gate, he showed his identity papers and was allowed to enter. He continued following the girl's scent until he reached her house. Whatever she did, Granuel could sense every movement only through her fragrance. He stayed near the house throughout the night. As soon as he found the right chance, he quietly climbed over the wall and entered the property. Soon he saw the young woman standing on the balcony. She had picked some fresh flowers to place on her mother's memorial. Just then, her father called her by name. That was how Granuel learned that her name was Laura. Around the same time, there was also a young man and a young woman living in the city. Their love had only just begun. Even while cutting flowers together, they kept teasing each other in a playful way. After the flowers were harvested, they were sent to perfume factories across the city. Granuel soon got a job at one of those perfume factories. Because of his incredible skills, it took only a few days for him to catch the attention of the factory owner, Madame Arnolfi. The factory supervisor became more and more jealous of Granuel. He kept finding ways to trouble him every single day. That night, we see the same young couple from the flower fields. They had finally found a chance to meet in private. The young man was excited, but the girl started teasing him. To make him chase her, she climbed onto the roof. Then, as a joke, she pushed the ladder down with him still on it. The young man became angry. He locked her inside the small room and walked away. The frightened girl started shouting for help. After a while, someone placed a ladder against the roof for her, but it was not her boyfriend, rather it was Granuel. The next morning, we see her body from inside the large glass tank where the flowers were boiled to extract their scent. By then, Granuel has begun the process of taking the scent from her body. Suddenly, Granuel heard someone coming. He quickly covered the tank with a large sack. A female worker had arrived carrying freshly picked flowers. As she stood there, she became curious to learn exactly how perfumes were made from flowers. The woman walked inside to check the equipment. Granuel's heart started beating very fast. He immediately warned her not to touch anything. Just then, Madame Arnolfi also entered the room. She noticed that the boiler was covered and asked what was inside. Granuel calmly replied that he was experimenting with a new fragrance. The supervisor smelled the water to check it, but he could not detect any scent at all. He laughed and said, "Your experiment has failed. Stop wasting your time." But Granuel had no intention of giving up. Soon after, he hired a prostitute. He also carried a container filled with animal fat. The woman looked at the fat with confusion and wondered what he was planning to do. Granuel explained that he wanted to create a perfume and needed the scent of her body. The woman agreed. Her pet dog was also in the room, quietly watching everything. At first, everything went smoothly, but the moment the woman noticed a knife near Granuel, she became frightened. Granuel killed her on the spot, then he carefully cut off all of her hair. After that, he covered her entire body with a thick layer of animal fat and wrapped her tightly in cloth. His goal was to let her natural scent slowly soak into the fat over the next several hours. The process was long and exhausting, but Granuel continued with complete patience. Hours later, he scraped off the scented fat and collected it, then he carried it back to the perfume factory. There, he mixed the fat with the woman's hair. He boiled the mixture, strained it, and filtered it again and again until the pure fragrance finally came out. Meanwhile, news of the woman's murder had spread throughout the city, but no one had any idea what had really happened to her. Then something unusual happened. As soon as the woman's pet dog caught the smell of its owner, it ran straight to Granuel. Everything became clear. Granuel had successfully captured the woman's natural scent inside a perfume. This was the first big success in his plan, but he was not going to stop there. Now he needed 12 more special fragrances, 12 notes that would help him create the mysterious 13th note. The very next night was Laura's birthday. The house was full of guests, music, and celebration. Granuel was there as well, quietly searching for his next victim. When all the candles were blown out, the girls decided to play a game of hide and seek. In the game, the boys had to find the girls. There was also a small maze near the garden where Laura and her friends went to hide. Seeing the perfect chance, Granuel quietly followed Laura. He moved slowly and carefully, just like a hunter following its prey. But that night, luck was on Laura's side. She survived. Before the game ended, Granuel had already disappeared. When everyone came out of the maze, a strange silence filled the place. Two young girls had mysteriously vanished from inside the maze. By then, Granuel had already begun extracting extracting the fragrance from their bodies. Everyone searched every corner of the maze, but the girls were nowhere to be found. The next morning, their dead bodies were discovered under a bridge in the water. Their hair had been cut off, and their bodies were left completely naked. Fear spread across the entire city. During the court meeting, some people demanded a citywide curfew so the killer would not be able to escape, but many merchants strongly opposed the idea. They argued that a curfew would destroy their businesses. Even the judge agreed and said, "The whole city will go bankrupt." Laura's father tried his best to convince everyone, but no one listened to him. Only a few days later, another young girl disappeared. The following day, the body of a shepherd girl was found in a field. Her hair had also been cut off, and her body was left without clothes. By now, 4 girls had been murdered. Only then did the authorities finally realize how serious the situation had become. A curfew was declared across the city. Police officers were placed in every street and every neighborhood, but the murders still did not stop. Grenouille continued capturing one fragrance after another. By now, he had already created 5 notes using the scents of 5 different girls. Soon, the 6th girl also became his victim. Fear had reached its highest level in the city. The police were completely helpless. They had no clues and no witnesses. Then the 7th girl disappeared as well. By now, Laura's father had understood that this killer was no ordinary man. He noticed that every victim was a young virgin and exceptionally beautiful. He believed the murderer was taking something from their beauty. Maybe their hair, maybe their skin, or perhaps something even more mysterious. He had reached a completely different conclusion from everyone else. While the city's important people were still discussing the case, another shocking report arrived. The 8th girl had disappeared. Now the air of grass carried only one thing: the smell of fear. If any young man was seen anywhere near a girl, people immediately became suspicious. Without asking any questions, they attacked him and beat him badly. The next day, terrible news arrived once again. The 9th girl had also disappeared. People became so frightened that they shut every window and every door in their homes. They even closed the smallest openings where light could enter. One man was collecting wooden boards to cover his windows, but when he moved the pile of wood, he found the body of the 10th girl hidden underneath. Only a few days later, the 11th girl disappeared as well. By now, Grenouille had successfully created 11 different fragrance notes. His masterpiece was almost complete. He now needed only 2 more scents. But the fear inside the city had become so great that people suspected everyone. They even started shooting without thinking whenever they believed someone looked suspicious. Grass no longer felt like a normal city. It had become more like a giant prison where every person believed they might be the next victim. The fear reached an even darker level when the body of a nun was found inside the church. This murder was the most terrifying of them all because even a holy place was no longer safe. By now, Grenouille needed only one final victim to complete his 13th note. Then something unbelievable happened. News spread through the city that the killer had finally been caught. Everyone was shocked when they learned that the man had surrendered himself and confessed to all the murders. The whole city celebrated as if a festival had returned. People danced in the streets all night and celebrated for hours. But Laura's father still could not believe it. Something inside him warned that a terrible danger was still waiting. He kept thinking, what if the man who surrendered is not the real killer? That night, he somehow managed to fall asleep, but he had a frightening nightmare. He woke up in panic and ran straight to Laura's room. She was alive, but the window was open. Laura told him that she had never opened it. The moment he heard those words, he became terrified. Without wasting a single moment, he decided that they would leave the city the very next morning. At sunrise, he secretly took Laura to a hidden and secure place. But Grenouille's powerful nose had already recognized Laura's scent. He quietly followed her fragrance until he reached their hiding place. Back in the city, another shocking discovery was made. The prostitute's dog had started digging at the ground. The police followed it and found several girls' clothes and cut hair buried under the soil. Everything became clear. The real murderer was Grenouille. By the time the investigation was completed, Grenouille had already reached Laura's hiding place. Laura's father locked her inside what he believed was the safest room in the house. He thought she would finally be protected, but he made one serious mistake. He left the key on the table. Late that night, while everyone was sleeping deeply, Grenouille quietly entered the house. He picked up the key, unlocked the door, and did what he had come to do. Then he disappeared without leaving any trace behind. The next morning, Laura's father opened the door. His scream echoed through the entire house. Laura was lying dead on her bed. He immediately ordered all of his men to search everywhere and bring the monster back no matter what it took. By then, Grenouille had finally completed his 13th note. He mixed all 12 fragrance notes together and added the final one. At last, his perfect perfume was finished, but at that exact moment, Laura's father's men reached his hideout. Grenouille was captured. When they demanded to know why he had killed Laura, he gave only one calm answer. I needed her. No matter how many times they asked the question, he repeated the same words in the same quiet voice. The story now returns to the day when Grenouille was about to be executed. The city looked as if it was celebrating another festival. Huge crowds filled the streets. People stood on rooftops. Everyone wanted to watch the infamous murderer die. Inside the prison, everything was ready for the execution. The jailer came to take Grenouille to the gallows. At that moment, Grenouille secretly opened the small bottle containing his perfume. As soon as its fragrance spread through the air, something unbelievable happened. The scent filled the entire place like magic. The jailer, the soldiers, and everyone nearby became completely stunned. When Grenouille was brought onto the execution platform, even the executioner fell to his knees before him. But that was only the beginning. As the perfume spread through the crowd, the people completely lost control. The scene looked almost like heaven. Some called Grenouille an angel. Others called him the angel of love. People began hugging each other without hesitation. Every face showed a strange mix of love and desire. Those who had hated each other only moments earlier suddenly expressed deep affection. There were no rules, no shame, and no fear anymore. It was as if the entire crowd had drowned in an endless ocean of desire. Even the church priest could not resist the perfume's power. Everyone believed that Grenouille was no ordinary man. They thought he was a divine being sent by God. But at that very moment, sadness appeared on Grenouille's face. He realized that even after achieving everything he had dreamed of, he still could not feel true love inside his heart. He remembered the very first girl who had made him experience the feeling of love. Tears filled his eyes. He thought that if he had not killed her by accident, she might still have been with him today. Just then, Laura's father pushed through the crowd with a sword in his hand. He shouted, "You may fool everyone else, but you cannot fool me." Grenouille quietly surrendered and said, "Kill me. I do not deserve anyone's love." But as Laura's father came closer, the perfume's fragrance reached him as well. His expression suddenly changed. The anger disappeared from his face. The sword slipped from his hand. Then he looked at Grenouille with tears in his eyes and said, "My son, you are my son." Grenouille stood there without saying a word. It was as if he already knew that even though he had won everything, he had truly lost. A few hours later, the magical effect of the perfume finally faded away. People looked around and were shocked to find themselves in embarrassing situations. No one could remember what had happened. Only shame and silence remained across the entire city. The town council immediately ordered a new investigation. This time, all suspicion fell on Grenouille's supervisor. He was arrested and tortured for 14 hours. In the end, he falsely confessed to all the murders. He admitted, "Yes, I killed them all." Soon after, he was executed by hanging and the case was officially closed. But the real killer, Grenouille, was already halfway back to Paris. He still had enough perfume left to control countless people if he wanted. He could have gained unlimited wealth, fame, and power. But none of those things mattered anymore. Deep inside, he still felt completely empty. He had achieved everything except the one thing he had always wanted, the feeling of true love. Even after winning, he had lost. That defeat had completely broken him from the inside. So he returned to the place where his life had begun, the city of Paris. Late at night, he walked back to the same dirty streets where he had been born. The area was filled with filth, foul smells, and decay. There, Grenouille poured the entire bottle of his perfume over his body. Then the inevitable happened. The beggars, criminals, and starving people nearby rushed toward him. Within moments, they completely tore him apart. And with that, this story ends here. If you liked this video, then like it and subscribe to our channel to watch more such videos. Thanks for watching.